3 days ago, Shinny was walking down the street. On the way, there was a well in the ground surrounded by stones. The young man did not notice it and fell right into the hole. It was very deep, but as it turned out, there was a lot of space beneath it, resembling a cave. Landing on his stomach, the guy began to inhale and scream in pain because he had fallen from a considerable height. His clothes were torn in places and his leg hurt terribly. He grabbed it and screamed in pain. His leg was broken. The guy rolled over onto his back with all his might and realized that he would not be able to get out of this place because he was far underground. Shinny began to reflect on his time in this place and was quite surprised when he realized that he couldn't estimate it. He could only make an assumption that it was either 2 o'clock or 10. The young man tried to get to his feet many times, but it didn't work. He understood that this would be of no use because the well he had fallen into was too deep and he wouldn't be able to just climb out of it. Shinny got up on his knees and thought about who could save him, but he immediately concluded that he had no idea if anyone even knew about this well and the places. The young man also concluded that it would be better to die than to be humiliated by Zion's gang. It was night. 4 people were standing near a huge tree wrapped in a thick rope. One of them was arrested. He stood with his arms crossed, holding a branch in one hand. There were 3 other people standing behind him, all dressed the same, a gray long shirt with a black belt. One of the guys decided to warn them about the danger. He explained that they were now in forbidden territory, about which not very pleasant rumors had spread. People said that monsters lived in it. "Should we continue to wait until the person we came for comes out?" one asked. To which Zion replied that he would not leave in any case because that person dared not take him seriously. Zion promised that as soon as he came out, he would immediately lose his head. This was said with special anger. But right after that, the guy said that he was completely sure that this man wouldn't be able to sit there forever. The man reminded Zion that they had already been standing there all evening, and if the old man also noticed them, things wouldn't end well for them. Zion was angered by this and shouted that they had absolutely nothing to fear because the old man was busy with his business. He concluded that they couldn't expect him to come today. The guy noticed that there were no prohibitions for him. Since some dared to come here, it meant he could succeed, because he was no worse than them. That guy took the first confident step towards the path to the forbidden place and ordered others to stop believing in nonsense. Still, one of his guys repeated the rumors about the monster living inside. Meanwhile, a large flock of black and red crows swooped down on them. All the guys were seriously scared, thinking it was a monster. They began to run away from the place in a panic. Zion began to think about himself and assume that something bad had happened. He had a feeling that it came from somewhere, not just by chance. Meanwhile, Shinny was still lying in the well, remembering how Zion had humiliated him. He recalled how Angela anxiously clarified whether Zion was really doing this to him again. The guy was lying there and feeling very hungry because he hadn't eaten. Lying there, his hand accidentally touched something soft. He assumed it might have been an animal, but panicked when he realized that there was someone else in the well with him. Cold sweat was running down Shinny's cheek as he saw someone's mouth with huge teeth. He was terribly scared. His heart began to pound wildly, and he couldn't move from fear. The guy realized it was a monster. He was scared and couldn't believe that he was going to die now. Mentally, he began to calm himself, trying to convince himself that there was nothing to be afraid of. After recovering a little, Shinny began to think. He wondered why the monster was there and what was wrong with it. After noticing the chain on the monster, he didn't understand who had put it there or why. Shinny stood up and decided to throw a stone at the monster to check if it was alive. The monster didn't move. The guy concluded that it was dead. 10 days passed, and the monster still lay there, motionless. Not a single sound was heard from it. The guy sat next to it and realized that he would not be able to get out. Shinny didn't even have water, let alone food, and the well was too deep for him to escape. He was trapped. The young man was in deep despair. He understood that he would never get out of here again. He would never see Angela. His eyes filled with tears as he mentally apologized to Angela, knowing he would never come back to her. He began to remember all the moments associated with Angela. One day after his escape, she asked him if he had really decided to run away when other children had bullied him, shouting that he was useless trash. Angela had approached him to treat his wounds, telling him to be more careful in the future. He remembered all the happy moments with her, even when they were walking and she had taken him in her arms. When Shinny ran away, Angela had asked him not to do that anymore, saying that she would always be with him. But now, all of it was ruined because he was in a well from which it was impossible to escape. But then, he realized that he couldn't just give up. He had to survive. If he failed, Zion's gang could reach Angela and hurt her, which was his greatest fear. He wanted the best for Angela, and it was impossible to let that happen. Besides, he didn't want to let them kill him either. He told himself every time that he had to survive that he couldn't just die like that. There was no way out for Shinny, but the craving for life was still strong. So despite everything, the young man ate the demon's flesh. He ate it quickly, swallowing it in large chunks to avoid the disgusting taste and get sated faster. But the fact that he had just eaten it was terrible. Perhaps this was the taste of raw demon meat. He shoved it into himself almost by force, while some of it fell to the ground from his mouth. Over time, he got used to the taste of monster meat, even telling himself it wasn't so bad. Pulling away from the dead monster a little, he thought about Angela. The guy begged the girl to wait for him, but then blood started pouring out of his mouth. He screamed at the top of his voice in pain. Leaning on his hands, he began to be overwhelmed by a huge force that completely engulfed his entire body. His appearance changed. Horns protruded from his head, and his hands became black with sharp fingers. There were also holes in them from which purple light was coming. The guy looked up and easily reached the base of the well with his hand as it began to stretch like gum. Shinny quickly pulled his arm back into its former shape. When he was outside, its appearance turned back to normal. Shinny realized that he had finally climbed out and was very happy. He looked at his hands and didn't understand whether it was a dream or if he had turned into a monster and received some kind of power. Shinny assumed that he had turned into that monster and thought that, if so, he would need to hide it from other people. At that moment, a man was standing behind him, watching everything from behind a tree. He was horrified when he realized that this boy was a monster, and then decided to report this to the village headman for safety. At that moment, a butterfly flew into Shinny's mouth. He didn't realize that he had accidentally swallowed it, but the butterfly was eaten. Big wings appeared behind the guy's back, the same as the butterflies. He started screaming in fright, saying that he was afraid of heights and ordering them to let him go to the ground. And so it happened. With a crash, he fell, scattering all the birds in the neighborhood. For millions of years, humans and demons have been living in hatred for each other. One day, people who called themselves the Chosen Ones received a special power, a glimmer of light. This power was suited for fighting demons. The Chosen Ones decided to expel all monsters from their lands and kill them forever. Each demon had its own level of strength, so people put seals on the strongest demons. There is a legend in the world about an organization called the Cage. Its members have sealed 18 demons all over the world. These people, always wandering outside the mundane, were incredibly strong and mysterious. Thanks to them, humanity has enjoyed happiness and tranquility for hundreds of years. But monsters are still hiding in the most impenetrable darkness of the world. A girl named Angela stood at a large house in the village of Talion, looking down thoughtfully. After asking for help from the council to find Shinny, she left the room and saw a guy standing near the fence. Without hesitation, she ran into his arms, glad that he was alive. Shinny stroked her head and said with a grin that everything was fine with him. He was holding a rabbit behind his back. Previously, the guy had brought her the corpses of small animals as a gift, and she had scolded him for it. The girl thought it was strange, but now the guy had the opportunity to bring live wild animals to Angela. So without hesitation, he handed her the rabbit, saying that it was his gift. Suddenly, the girl, seeing danger behind Shinny, sharply exclaimed that he should take care of himself. The guy turned around sharply and immediately fell into a trap of ropes. Angela began to worry very much about him. Zion and his gang were standing behind him. They had especially made this trap to capture Shinny. The leader of this gang, looking complacently at the guy who fell into his trap, mocked. Zion noticed that now the young man would not be able to just run away as had happened then. Mocking, he was surprised at the behavior of Shinny because he had finally matured, since he did not dare to leave the forest when they were guarding him. But now he had come to his girlfriend resolutely. The guy voiced his desire. He longed for Shinny to beg him for mercy by kneeling before him. At this time, Angela was very worried, shouting to the leader of the gang to come to his senses and let the guy go. But he did not understand her, because he believed that there was nothing good in a young man trapped in ropes, and she was taking care of him in vain. After that, Zion approached the girl and put his arm around her shoulders, saying that it was better for her to stay with him, arguing that she should like everything. The girl tried to escape from his arms, screaming for him to let her go, but Zion did not let go. Shinny was watching everything from the trap. He was furious after seeing Zion's behavior towards Angela, so he decided to use his power. By his order, the trap was destroyed in an instant, which made everyone scared. Our main character did not want to show people his essence, but this attitude of his enemy towards his beloved forced him. People ran away screaming, mistaking the guy for a monster. Shinny abruptly flew up to the leader of the gang and knocked him to the ground. Grabbing the guy by the throat, he almost wanted to kill Zion, but the latter begged him for mercy. The young man did not understand how someone like him could be spared, because it was from him, for many years, that Shinny had suffered various humiliations that could not be corrected by a simple apology. He was glad that his enemy would finally feel the fear that our hero had experienced for many years on his own skin. But the battle was interrupted after Angela's request to leave Jian. The guy roughly stood up and looked at the girl, gradually withdrawing his strength. The leader of the gang, wasting no time, got up and ran away in terror. Shenny looked at the girl, afraid that she would take him for a monster, and pronounced her name. She just said that it wasn't him, but continued to watch him in horror. The guy was in despair and did not understand why he was mistaken for a monster. After all, he was the same person as everyone else. Angela, with her head down, was silent. Suddenly, screams were heard. There were a lot of people with guns in the back, shouting that the one they were looking for was in front of them. Two people grabbed Angela. She tried her best to break free, ordering them to let her go, but it was useless. The man standing in front turned to Dewey, telling him not to dare attack them. People shouted that the guy was a monster, and the man noticed that he had no idea where main character went through. But he understood that people who had become monsters had no right to live. He offered to go with them, but not to bear his claws. After that, the crowd aimed their weapons at the monster guy, shouting that they could not let him escape because he would devour everyone, so he should be killed. Our main character chuckled to himself at the man who called his strength claws. Shinny said that there was no reason for him to go with them because all these days he had been lying in a well next to a bound monster, without a chance of salvation. The man replied that he had apparently entered the forbidden territory and encountered a demon eater, and the guy had turned into a monster, so he wouldn't be able to preserve his identity while in the village. He also said that the mission of their village as one of the forbidden places of the seal of the organization Cage was to make sure monsters did not enter the world. Shinny said that for many years when he was an orphan, he was humiliated by Zion and others, but not one adult had helped him. The guy didn't understand why he became a monster because he hadn't done anything wrong, but he was already surrounded by the whole village. At this time, Angela was watching what was happening with tears in her eyes. Afterward, the guy asked the man what kind of personality he then had since he acted like this. The man ordered the guards to grab him and prepare a sealing sword. In his opinion, the guy had finally become a demon. There was a crash. The village was attacked by monsters. People were in a panic and ran away as quickly as possible, shouting at the top of their lungs. The demons were rampaging, and the man realized that ordinary monsters only grouped together when the primordial monster was active, but only the eighth devouring demon could cause such a big change, and Dewey had now really become one. One of the monsters attacked the man, but Shinny quickly beheaded it and noticed himself that he was not a monster, but a man. Mentally, he begged Angela to trust him, because no matter what way, no matter what pain or suffering, it didn't matter to him. Shinny wanted the girl to wait for him, and he in turn would appear before her as a person. Angela was standing in the middle of a battlefield of demons and humans, surrounded by a huge number of dead bodies. She didn't understand where the monsters came from and what had happened. The girl decided to run away quickly, but suddenly one of the demons attacked her. A couple of moments later, she would have been dead, but Shenny managed to kill the monster in time, cutting it into two parts. After that, he quickly flew up to the girl, promising to do everything possible so that the monsters could not hurt her. Angela looked into the guy's eyes and said his name. At this time, the man understood that Shenny had not only saved him, but also protected Angela. He concluded that the guy had preserved completely human emotions and intelligence. He was very surprised because he had considered the young man a demon eater before. An elderly man standing behind hit the man, saying that now was not the time to give himself up to thoughts. He screamed in pain. Despite this, he continued to yell at him, saying that he had completely forgotten about their plan. To this, the man replied that he was not out of his mind. Like that, the second cheered up and ordered the residents to be taken away according to the plan, and he, in turn, would cover him. They abruptly gave the order to the first and second group. The first one had to take away all the residents, and the second one had to go after the elderly man. He exclaimed about the need to hold out and protect the others. The people confirmed the order in unison. At this time, Shinny, taking Angela by the hand, promised to take her out of here. The girl filled the young man in about the others. He turned his gaze to the fighting people. People scolded because there were only more monsters. Someone exclaimed that it was necessary to hold on until all the residents were safe. One young man shouted to the headman for help as the demon was too strong and he could not cope alone. At that moment, the monster ate one of the people. The head gave the order for the warriors to detain all the demons. The monster attacked him from the back, but the man reacted quickly and cut off several limbs of the demon. However, it grabbed another elder. People panicked and began to exclaim that if they did not save the headman, they would all be finished because there were too many monsters. At this time, Shinny quickly flew up to the demon and, using his strength, quickly cut the monster and saved the headman. All the people were amazed. Our main character turned to the people, who were very concerned about the condition of the man. Angela screamed Shinny's name. Everyone was surprised that the guy was helping them and not fighting against them. They realized that he was not a monster at all, and the headman noticed that it didn't matter if he was a demon. The village was safe thanks to him. Dewey explained that he had saved the village only for Angela's sake. At this time, the man noticed the frozen people and gave the order to move on. The guy turned to the girl, telling her to follow him to get away from dangerous territory. Angela agreed. It was hurt how people were given orders to remain calm and prepare to defend themselves from another monster. Suddenly, a loud baby crying was heard. The child was screaming at the top of his lungs, lying on the ground. Angela ran to the child to save him, and Shinny tried to stop her to no avail. It was her brother. The girl ran to him and began to calm him down, saying that his sister was nearby. The child began to calm down, but still cry, saying his sister's name. Suddenly, a monster attacked the girl and the child from behind. Dewey, looking at this, panicked and shouted her name. He quickly flew up to the demon, cutting it. After that, the guy ran to Angela, saying that he would take her to the doctor. The girl refused and said that looking at him, she saw his fear. Shinny advised her to save her strength, but she began to apologize to him for her doubts about him. The guy realized that they could no longer be together all the time and told Angela about it. She abruptly lost consciousness. Shinny got very angry and let himself out of control. People in horror began to exclaim that the guy was not himself. They did not understand why, after the recent help, he began to behave like this. One person noticed that the first one should take a closer look and understand all the danger, because now Shinny was scarier than any monster. The guy turned his gaze to the people and flew up to one of the warriors, grabbing him by the throat. The man began to choke, and the headman shouted to Dewey that Angela would not approve of such an act. Suddenly, Shinny threw the panting warrior to the ground. The man screamed from suffocation and pain. The headman spoke about the need to seal our main character in a forbidden territory because of the natural laws of people and monsters. The guy himself saw that the demon in him almost killed a man. The man didn't want it to come to this either. Dewey flew up to the girl and picked her up, apologizing for not being able to save her. After that, the guy turned to the people, saying that he would leave because he was not going to take revenge and harm them, and there was no reason to worry. The headman explained that he only wanted to warn Shinny about the great danger threatening him and offered his last help. All existing monsters are descended from the progenitor. He has terrible power and he created the strongest demons, and they summon the rest of the monsters. After the appearance of these demons, demon slayer squads appeared. Thanks to everyone's efforts, they killed and sealed them. Among the 18 demons sealed by the Cage organization, the 8th demon, the Devourer, has the ability to absorb. Once he was a real disaster. The Devourer was impossible to kill, so he was sealed inside the well, as well as the other 17 demons. Hundreds of years later, a village of several hundred people gradually formed on the place, where chaos and destruction reigned. It is now the current village of Talion. The man explained to the guy that he could risk his life and seal Dewey here, thereby fulfilling the mission of the village. But the headman saw how the young man had grown up and that he had done nothing wrong. So he would keep our main character alive, and the village would be ordered to keep his secret. However, there are also many villages and organizations outside, such as Talion Village. Some of them are much more serious and powerful. He warned the guy that he should realize this because he would have to live like a wild beast, stay alone, and in no case approach people. Shinny thanked the man and said that he was not going to become a beast, as he had made a promise to Angela. The headman interrupted him, saying that there was a way to become a man again. Dewey turned to him with interest. Mentally, the guy began to think of Angela, remembering his childhood when Shinny was little. Zion and the others didn't accept him. Then the girl told him that since he was considered an outsider, he should not give up, but on the contrary, surpass them and always stand tall. Shinny thought to himself that now he was no different from the monster. He follows the girl's words and looks for an opportunity to become human again. The headman told the guy that in the ancient records of the village of Talion, which they kept, it was said that only demons knew about the ways of turning people into monsters. The specific content had been lost over time, but other organizations might still have records. The organization Kara is one of the strongest organizations in the fight against monsters. You can find them if you go straight to the southeast of the village. The man also advised Shinny to try to blend in with them without revealing his appearance, otherwise he would face death. After that, our main character set off on a journey to find a way to become human again and fulfill the promise made to Angela. Loud sounds came from the forest, so much so that all the birds flew away. There was a battle between a monster and people. The young man jumped from behind at the demon with swords in his hands and hit exactly the target with a shout. People exclaimed that the monster should not be allowed to leave. After being wounded, the demon weakened a little. One young man noticed that the deputy commander slowed him down, and this was their chance to win. Suddenly, the monster howled. It was a terrible sound. All the people who fought with him covered their ears. The demon, taking advantage of the moment, tried to leave. But the commander of the squad came out onto the battlefield, uttering a spell, a spiritual thread. Everyone was very happy about his arrival. Suddenly, red threads appeared out of nowhere. It was the commander's ability. He used them to attack the monster, but purple circles appeared above the demon, creating a portal. The monster climbed in and disappeared, and the portal closed. People realized that they had failed again by letting him go. They said that the demon was a little stronger than the Devourer, but they did not understand why it was so difficult to catch him. He was quite weak and could not stand fast running. The warriors did not know what to do since even the red thread of the commander could not catch him. The head ordered everyone to be calmer. Even though the demon slipped away this time and wouldn't appear for a while, they now had another matter of paramount importance. Crazed crowds of monsters began to appear everywhere, and everyone should worry about it. There were remnants of the smell on the red thread, and if you follow it, you can find the place where the demon was born. Having said this, the commander gave an order to 3 people, Trunk, the Master, and the Pikes. They had to unite in one group, hunt down the monsters, and then deal with them. One of them approached the commander-in-chief with a question. Because of this, he was surprised that they had not left yet and asked what he needed. The warrior asked where the commander was going, who ordered them to hunt down the monster. He replied that he would go to Yecheng to check the situation because something bad was happening there. Meanwhile, Dewey was in Yecheng. The guy was mentally thinking about how he got there. The young man had heard on the way to the city that a small group of Mangzhu from the Kara organization was going to select people for some task, so Shenny hurried there on purpose. The guy initially thought that this city was the same as his village, but he did not expect to see such high houses and a huge number of people. A group of people passed by the young man, and by chance Dewey heard their conversation. It was not surprising to them that Yecheng is one of the main bases of the leader of Mangzhu, because the city is prosperous. One guy noticed that the city became like this thanks to the patronage of strong people. To this, another young man told him not to be a jerk. But the guy explained that Commander Mangzhu is one of the strongest commanders of Kara. Our main character understood that he knew very little about the Kara organization and decided to eavesdrop on the guy's conversation. One of them continued to talk about Commander Mangzhu and said that he was very kind to people, but when it comes to hunting demons, he behaves very strictly. Not a single monster escaped from his hands. His red thread is able to recognize even the most disguised monster. The guy wondered how it was possible not to idolize such a strong man. Privately, Shenny suggested that perhaps the commander's ability would reveal his essence. Suddenly, one of the guys turned to Dewey, asking what he was doing there because he looked like a beggar in his opinion. Our main character remained silent, and because of this, he was pushed to the ground while they shouted at him. The guy noticed that there was a very expensive establishment there and ordered Shenny to get out of the area. His friends asked him to be less violent, and the guy thought that they were somehow connected with him. He turned around and shouted at them to go inside if they wanted to eat and to mind their own business. Meanwhile, Dewey successfully escaped from them. After that, they were very surprised by the behavior of the guy, calling him a strange type and assuming that he was mute because when they spoke to him, he ran away. Another noticed that he might have an urgent matter and offered to go eat. Shenny ran into a dark alley. Leaning his hand on the wall, he realized that thanks to the demonic power, he had rushed there to catch the recruitment of the group. He was very hungry now, but in order to satisfy his hunger, he needed to eat living creatures. Otherwise, it would be increasingly difficult for him to control himself. The guy noticed that fortunately, he was not particularly excited now and only needed to calm down a little and then return to his usual form. Suddenly, there were sounds from above. Shenny raised his head and saw a spider-like demon that had caught a human in its web. The person was calling for help. The guy quickly used his strength, flying up to the monster and defeating it. He rescued the child from the web and, taking him in his arms, tried to talk to him. But he lost consciousness. Dewey understood how lucky he was that the boy did not see his strength and was surprised by the appearance of a demon in the city. Suddenly, the guy felt a pleasant smell coming from the boy. He wanted to eat him, but immediately abandoned the idea. Meanwhile, Commander Mangzhu was standing near the yellow fog in the city. A boy ran out to meet him, joyfully shouting his name and saying that his cart was in the fog. The man promised to return the cart to the child, but only if he left the area because it was very dangerous there. The boy quickly agreed and ran off, but then turned around and asked if it was true that Mangzhu was currently performing a special task. The commander confirmed and asked the boy to fulfill his special assignment. It consisted of warning others not to get close to the yellow gas. The man asked if the child could handle it, to which the boy promised mandatory execution of the order. The child ran off to warn others, and Mangzhu turned away, pulling a mask over his face so as not to suffocate from the yellow gas. Our main character was lying on a bed in someone else's apartment. 3 people were standing next to him. The boy asked them to explain why Uncle still hadn't woken up. A woman told him to be quiet so as not to disturb him. Suddenly, Shenny opened his eyes. The child was delighted, saying that Uncle had finally woken up. The man standing behind them turned around to call Miss Tanya. A girl leaning on the bed asked about Dewey's well-being, but he only asked for permission to speak. Suddenly, the door to the room opened. A man entered together with a girl named Tanya. He told her that the guide had finally woken up. Tanya turned to Shining, crossing her arms and confirming that he had indeed regained consciousness. She reached out and touched him, saying she would check on him first. The guy asked her to begin by explaining what had happened to him.